hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now today's ink I have in sample form Noodler's Ottoman Rose. It's a dark pink. All the tests were done in this Waterman Hemisphéré, or Hemisphéré. It's a fine nib, but this is really probably the finest nib that I own. I would go so far as to say it is more fine than my Lamy Extra Fine, and more fine than my Hero 616s before they've been tampered with. This is a very fine nib. Check out the chromatography. As you can see, there's this line of very light pink down here. Then it goes into almost barely there baby pink with little streaks, and then into a slightly lighter, almost like a magenta, and then a band of dark pink, almost red up at the top. Let's check out the paper test. Clairefontaine 90 grams per square meter. As you can see, it's very dark pink. It's a dark, rich pink. 8 seconds to dry, which really surprised me because, as I said, this is a very fine nib. You do get some shading. I don't know if I'll be able to get it on camera, knowing my luck, because it's such a fine nib. But, yeah, the flow was decent. No bleed feather spread. No echo at all. Water test was not great. It did dye the paper, and not a lot is there. But, yeah, I said dark pink in color, like a richer version of Private Reserve's Arabian Rose, and a little more pink and a little less purple than Arabian Rose. So next is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter. Here I feel like the shading came through just a little bit better. You see in some of the writing and in the scrubby. 7 seconds to dry, which again is kind of long for such a very, very fine nib. Yeah, no bleed feather spread. I said no sheen seen here because, I mean, if you look at the edges of that scrubby, it looks like it almost wants to sheen, but it didn't. Yeah, that's pretty gone. It dyed the paper a little bit, and what's there is not terribly readable. Next is Tomoe River Paper, where it took 9 seconds to dry, which, okay, I know this is Tomoe River Paper, but for such an obscenely fine nib, that's surprising. And I put this little asterisk here because I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it on camera, but it looks so close to sheening. But, yeah, I said it could sheen in a broader, wetter nib. I really do believe that it could. No bleed feather spread. I thought this pen paper ink combo was pretty decent. That's pretty gone, that water test. It didn't dye the paper much, but that would be hard to read and recover. I mean, again, maybe in a broader, wetter nib, but yeah, I laid it on pretty thick there, but everywhere else there's nothing to be seen. Now, here's where the trouble starts. This is 20-pound copier paper, the newer stuff, so not as bad as the old stuff, but not as good as the old stuff. 2 seconds to dry, which isn't bad, but this really just sort of became a pink. Just and like if you look at the R in red, it's starting to get a bit woolly, a bit fuzzy, like it's almost about to feather. Some bleed feather and spread, and as I said here, I have to believe that the ink is what's problematic because this is such a fine nib. And I mean, that's fairly there, but it feathered and exploded and it dyed the paper a bit and came through in spots, which doesn't bode well. Next is Mead Notebook Paper, where it took 3 seconds to dry. There's almost no bleed, which is impressive, but the feathering makes it pretty ugly. I mean, there's not a lot to see because it's a very fine nib in the first place, but you know, it's not great. And that water test is just ugly. And I mean, that's nice, but you can still see that it comes through in spots. So, and this is a really fine nib, so. Lastly is Moleskine paper, where it took 4 seconds to dry. You still kind of get shading-ish, but not really. I thought it became a much less interesting pink, but that's, you know, that's me personally. I have very strong opinions about pink. But, yeah, there's feathering, even in this really fine nib. So it's not putting down a lot of ink, and yet still there's feathering. That water test is mostly gone, and it did really feather. I mean, the bleed isn't too bad. It came through in spots, but still. So there you go. There's Noodler's Ottoman Rose. Even in a very fine nib, there was trouble on the cheaper papers, which I feel is something to keep in mind. It did very well on the fancier papers, and I do believe it would sheen on Tomoe River if it had a broader, wetter nib, but yeah, for your consideration from the Triple N Network. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching. Bye.